attention, partly because of the war on terror, partly because of the length of beards of the Afghans, and partly because they like to put all their women in tents with 2 holes for their eyes. And this country, which is of critical interest to us in the United States, you cannot get yourself or anything into Afghanistan except by going through Pakistan. Pakistan controls 95% of the imports and exports from Afghanistan. And so if anything has to be done in Afghanistan in the short term or in the long term, it has to be through Pakistan. And so those of you who have read a bit of history know the role that Pakistan played during the Soviet occupation of Afghanistan, which was one of those great victories of a noble people called the Afghans against a ruthless people called the Soviets, with the help of the courage of the Afghans, plus the support of Pakistan, plus the support of the United States. And later on, if during your Q&A you are interested in hearing some of the interesting anecdotes about that fight in Afghanistan, which led to the dissolution and disappearance of the Soviet Union and its replacement by Russia, there are stories to be recounted about that and about the role of Pakistan in that struggle. And finally, as Dr. Elise Salim never forgets reminding us, Pakistan is a nuclear country. Now, whether you like it or not, Pakistan has, by its own efforts, developed nuclear capacity. Nuclear capacity is not very difficult, basically. It takes time. Pakistan took 16 years after the first Indian explosion, which was 1974, and which is when the Pakistani effort started. And it took us 16 years to develop nuclear capacity, but by 1990, we had managed it, and we had managed it essentially through our own efforts. Having achieved nuclear capacity in 1990, we followed what is called the Israeli example of do not confirm and do not deny. This is what is called nuclear ambiguity. And that was the fundamental policy of Pakistan, and that was what I was trained as an expert in nuclear ambiguity. And it lasted for 8 years until, unfortunately, India exploded more nuclear devices in 1998, when we ultimately had to go public. And that's how I lost my job, because I'm not an expert in demonstrated nuclear capacity, but only in nuclear ambiguity. And once again, I'd be happy to tell you some anecdotes about how we did that in the 16 years between 1974 and 1990. But our current interest in Pakistan is unfortunately due to none of the reasons that I have already cited in front of you. Our current interest is because of 9/11, because suddenly we have rediscovered Pakistan as a result of the sad events which took place on the 11th of September several years ago. Because 9/11 had to be analyzed, and the analysis inevitably took us to Afghanistan, which meant the Taliban, and therefore we had to do something about the Taliban. And the Taliban, which are people, basically, the only way to spot a Taliban from anybody else is that his beard is longer than anybody else's. And so the Taliban had to be taken care of or addressed in some form or the other. And that could not be done without going through Pakistan, which incidentally had recognized the Taliban as the government in Afghanistan. And therefore, the interest in Pakistan came as a result of the interest in Afghanistan, which was in turn a result of the events of 9/11. Now, please note also that we got sidetracked somewhere after Afghanistan by something called Iraq. Nobody has still understood how we got diverted from Afghanistan into Iraq, because the case was not clear, and it sort of, the goalposts kept changing. Initially, we were told it was because of weapons of mass destruction. Then we were told it was because of the use of gas in the country against its own citizens. And so we never quite knew what was it that underlay the interest in Iraq, which certainly diverted us from Afghanistan, which was the primary cause of 9/11. And all of you who are following this extraordinary debate which is going on in the United States as a result of the coming elections, all of you know that the focus is on Iraq, on the manner in which it diverted us from Afghanistan, and on the need to refocus on Afghanistan. And therefore, as the refocus on Afghanistan occurs, which it inevitably will, you will find that Pakistan will come back onto center stage. And so that is perhaps the real reason why Dr. Elise Salem wanted to hear about Pakistan, because I think she's more worried about the danger of the fact that the Taliban might come back. And if the Taliban come back, all of us will have to grow beards. And the Taliban want even the women to grow beards. And so I think she's worried about her own inability to do that for the benefit of the Taliban. Now, Pakistan, for a few minutes, is not an easy country to encompass because it's a large country. It's a very complex country. It has, I told you, a large number of population, which is significantly large. It has a number of fractures in the country. And I just want to very honestly and sincerely put the fractures or the fault lines of Pakistan in front of you. The first fault line comes from the fact that the population of Pakistan is divided into 4 very distinct ethnic groups, which are the 4 provinces of Pakistan, but forget the provinces. It is that each province is a different ethnic group with a different ethnic language. Now, these are not small languages. The size of these 4 languages is 100 million speaking one language, 30 million speaking a second language, 20 million speaking a third, and 15 million speaking a fourth. So these are large languages, but they are totally distinct from each other. I speak only one of them. I do not understand a word out of the remaining 3 in Pakistan. And if I have to speak to Pakistanis from any of the other regions, I have to use an Esperanto or a lingua franca, which is called Urdu, which is a sort of an Irish stew of languages in which you cannot separate the onions from the potatoes, from the meat, from the gravy. And that lingua franca, which is called Urdu in Pakistan or Hindustani in India, enables us to move, in the whole of northern India at least, to move around freely between Pakistan and India and Bangladesh, and to be relatively understood so that you can at least ask for food and water and not be lost and not starve. So that lingua franca is the only common language that we have between 4 huge ethnic groups in Pakistan. And as I said, none of us speaks more than one of the languages of these 4 groups. But that means it's a fault line, because you have 4 people with 4 cultures, and therefore with 4 ways of looking at life, and therefore you need to bind them together in a country like Pakistan, and you need a cement. And that cement, which you can call Pakistani-ness, can be questioned, because you have to decide whether you are a Texan first and an American second, or an American first and a Texan second. And that type of debate occurs in Pakistan all the time. The second fault line that you have in Pakistan is a gap, and this is common to a large number of developing countries, of a gap between the super rich and the super poor.